The afternoon light filtered through frost-edged windows, turning the schoolhouse gray and cold. Grace Holloway stood at the blackboard, chalk dust on her fingers, teaching arithmetic to her mixed-age students. The younger children sat closer to the stove. The older ones stretched their legs beneath worn desks. Emma Thornton raised her hand during the lesson about families. Yes, Emma. Grace smiled at the 10-year-old girl with blonde braids and serious eyes. Miss Grace, what's a father supposed to do? The classroom went silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward Emma, then back to Grace. The teacher's smile faltered. She studied the child's face, searching for mischief or defiance. Found neither. Only genuine curiosity. What do you mean? Dear, Grace asked gently. I mean, what does a father do? What's his job in a family? The other children shifted in their seats. Young Timothy spoke up first. My pa teaches me to ride horses. I did not. Mine tells stories by the fire. Sarah added, Pa fixes things when they break. Offered Jacob. Emma listened with the focused intensity of someone cataloging foreign concepts. Edigasta, Deutsch. She nodded slowly, absorbing each answer like vocabulary in a language she'd never heard spoken. Grace's chest tightened. The child wasn't being difficult. She genuinely didn't know. The lesson continued, but Grace's mind stayed with that question. After the children filed out into the February cold, she asked Emma to stay. Tell me about your father, Grace said. Settling beside the girl on the bench, Emma's brow furrowed. He's very important. He owns the biggest ranch in 3 valleys. What do you do together? The girl thought hard. He signs papers. He rides out to check fences. Sometimes I see him at supper, but he reads reports while he eats. She paused. He works very hard to make sure I'll have everything I need. Does he ask about your day? Emma shook her head. He's busy building my future. Grace felt something crack inside her chest. Show me your latest drawing, the one about families. Emma pulled the paper from her satchel. She'd drawn a large house with many windows. 2 tiny figures stood far apart. One near the barn, one by the front door. The space between them stretched vast and empty. Grace held the drawing up to the lamplight. The distance between father and daughter measured in inches on paper. Miles in reality. Emma, would you like me to speak with your father? The girl's eyes widened. Why did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart. You did something very brave. You asked an important question. Grace folded the drawing carefully. And I think your father needs to hear it. Emma gathered her books. Uncertain. Grace watched her walk toward the door, small shoulders carrying a weight no child should bear. The teacher sat alone in the empty schoolroom as shadows lengthened. She stared at the family drawing under lamplight. Father was abstract concept, not lived experience. A title without meaning. And somewhere in that grand house across 3 valleys, a man was building an empire while losing his daughter. Grace made her decision. Tomorrow. She would visit the land baron. Thomas Thornton's study smelled of leather and pipe smoke. Maps covered the walls, showing land acquisitions stretching back 15 years. His desk held neat stacks of contracts, ledgers, reports, everything organized, everything controlled. He looked up when his housekeeper announced the schoolteacher. Miss Holloway. He stood, offering a chair. Is Emma having trouble with her studies? May I speak frankly? Mr. Thornton. Grace settled into the chair, back straight, hands folded. Please. He sat behind his desk, already reaching for his pocket watch. A man with limited time. Your daughter asked me a question today that troubled me deeply. Grace paused. She asked what a father is supposed to do. Thomas blinked. I'm sorry. Emma wanted to know what fathers do, what their role is in a family. But Grace kept her voice steady, matter of fact. The other children answered. They said fathers teach writing, tell stories, fix broken things. Emma listened like she was learning about a foreign country. His jaw tightened. Miss Holloway, I provide everything my daughter needs. This ranch will be hers someday. I'm building her future, securing her inheritance. I understand. Grace leaned forward slightly. What's Emma's favorite color? Thomas opened his mouth, closed it, his hand stilled on the watch. What does she dream about? Grace continued, her voice gentle as a scalpel. What frightens her? What makes her laugh? The silence grew heavy. Outside. A horse whinnied. A clock ticked on the mantel. What stories does she like best? Grace asked. Does she prefer morning or evening? Is she shy around strangers or bold? Thomas stood abruptly, walked to the window. His reflection stared back from the darkening glass. I work 16 hours a day, so she'll never want for anything. She wants to know you. He turned, defensive. You presume too much. Miss Holloway, you don't understand the burden of this responsibility. You're right. I don't understand how a man can share a house with his daughter and remain strangers. Grace rose, preparing to leave. Then she offered something unexpected. But I could help, if you'd let me. Help teach you to be a father, while teaching her what fathers can be. She met his gaze steadily. It's not too late, Mr. Thornton, but it will be, sooner than you think. Nicky wanted to argue, to defend the empire he'd built. But the questions hung in the air like accusations. What's Emma's favorite color? He had no answer. The chairman of the largest cattle operation in the territory couldn't name his daughter's favorite color. I'll consider your offer, he said stiffly. Grace nodded and left. Thomas stood alone in his study, surrounded by maps of conquered land. He looked at his ledgers, his contracts, his careful plans for Emma's inheritance. On the desk lay a copy of his will. Emma's name appeared 17 times. Beneficiary of everything he'd built. He'd given her the world on paper. He'd given her nothing that mattered. The lamplight flickered. Outside, night settled over the ranch. Somewhere in this house. His daughter prepared for bed. He couldn't remember the last time he'd tucked her in. Kissed her good night. Asked about her dreams. Thomas Thornton sat in his empire and felt poor for the first time in 15 years. Sleep wouldn't come. Thomas lay in the dark, remembering. Sarah had died when Emma was 2 years old. The fever took her in 3 days, burning through her like wildfire. One moment his wife was laughing in the garden. The next, she lay gray and still. The doctor said nothing could be done. Nature took its course. Thomas had held his infant daughter and felt the world collapse. So he'd done the only thing he knew how. He worked, bought the Miller property, expanded the herd, acquired water rights, built and built and built, telling himself he was securing Emma's future, making sure she'd never struggle the way he had as a child. Somewhere along the way, provision became excuse, distance became habit. He rose before dawn, pulled on his coat. The house slept quiet around him. His footsteps creaked on the floorboards as he walked to Emma's room. He pushed open the door, stood in the threshold. She slept peacefully. Blonde hair spread across the pillow. The room surprised him. Yellow curtains framed the window. Yellow flowers in a vase on the dresser. A yellow ribbon tied around her bedpost. When had she chosen these things? Had she always loved yellow? He stepped closer, studied his daughter's face in the pre-dawn light. She looked like Sarah. Same small nose, same delicate chin. But there was something of him in her, too. In the set of her jaw. The shape of her hands. What made her laugh? He didn't know. What frightened her? No answer. If he died tomorrow, what would she remember of him? His signature on documents. His back as he rode away each morning. Thomas Thornton had built an empire for a daughter who was becoming a stranger. The truth sat in his chest like a stone. He'd been hiding, using work as armor against grief, against fear, against the terrifying intimacy of loving someone he could lose. Easier to count cattle than risk his heart again. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmured something he couldn't hear. He wanted to know what she dreamed about, wanted to know everything he'd missed while building her future. But pride held him frozen in the doorway, unwilling to admit failure, unable to ask for help. Dawn crept through the yellow curtains. Thomas left before Emma woke, but at his desk. He pulled out a sheet of paper, picked up his pen. The words came hard, each one a stone from the wall he'd built around himself. 2 words only. Teach me. He sealed the note, sent his foreman to deliver it to the schoolhouse. Then he sat in the quiet study and waited for judgment. Grace's reply came that afternoon. She'd unfolded his note, read those 2 words, and understood what they cost him. The baron who commanded thousands of acres had submitted himself to education. Her response was simple. Tuesday evening, come ready to learn. Thomas stared at her neat handwriting. His hands shook slightly. He was 42 years old, and he was terrified of his own daughter. But he would try. For Sarah's memory, for Emma's future, for the child sleeping in a yellow room who deserved better than an inheritance without love. For he would learn to be a father, even if it meant dismantling every wall he'd built to protect himself from pain. Genisa. Grace arrived on Tuesday evening carrying a leather satchel and quiet determination. Thomas met her at the door, awkward in his own home. Thank you for coming, he said. I'm here for Emma. Grace's tone was kind but firm. Let's begin. She settled at the dining table, pulled out a small notebook. Your assignment for this week: eat supper with Emma every evening. Ask her 3 questions about her day. Actually, listen to the answers. Thomas nodded, treating it like a business meeting. Understood. This isn't a contract negotiation, Mr. Thornton. Grace's eyes held steel beneath kindness. This is your daughter's heart. Approach it accordingly. The first supper was painfully stiff. Emma entered the dining room, surprised to find her father already seated. He'd never joined her for meals on weeknights. Good evening, Emma, he said formally. Good evening. Papa. She sat, uncertain. They ate in silence for several minutes. Thomas cleared his throat. How was school today? Fine. Another silence. He tried again. What did you learn? Geography. Grace, observing from the doorway, shook her head slightly. He was conducting an interview, not a conversation. What's your favorite subject? He asked. Emma considered. I like art. Drawing and painting. Ah. Thomas had no response prepared. He'd exhausted his 3 questions in under a minute. Grace intervened gently. Emma, show your father what you drew yesterday. The girl brightened, fetched her sketchbook, She opened it to a watercolor of the ranch in springtime. Green hills dotted with wildflowers. The detail impressed him. "You painted this?" Thomas leaned closer. "Yes. I used the paints Miss Grace gave me for my birthday." Emma pointed to different elements. "These are buttercups, and these are the mountains at sunset." "What color are the mountains?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Purple and pink. Mostly. Sometimes gold when the light hits just right." She looked at him shyly. "Have you noticed?" He hadn't. In 10 years of ranching, he'd never really seen the sunset colors on his own mountains. "I'll pay attention tomorrow," he promised. Emma smiled. Small but real. Progress. After she went to bed, Grace reviewed the lesson. "You started stiff, but you got better. The key is genuine interest, not interrogation. It's harder than I expected." Thomas admitted, "Most important things are—" Grace packed her satchel. "Next time, share something about yourself. Conversation goes both ways." She paused at the door. "Mr. Thornton, do you know Emma's favorite color?" He remembered the yellow curtains, the yellow flowers. Yellow. Like sunlight. Grace smiled. "That's a start." Over the following week, Thomas kept his assignment. 3 questions each supper. He learned Emma loved reading adventure stories, that she wanted to learn piano someday, that she helped the cook make bread every Saturday morning. Small discoveries, but they added up. His daughter was becoming real to him. Not just a name on his will, but a person with thoughts and dreams and opinions. Grace visited twice more that week. Each time, she modeled natural conversation, showing how to ask follow-up questions, how to share his own experiences, how to listen with full attention. "You're improving," she said after the 3rd lesson. "Emma's starting to trust this will continue." "What do you mean?" "Children learn fast when adults are reliable. They also learn fast when adults disappoint." Grace met his eyes. "Don't start this unless you're willing to finish it. Inconsistency hurts worse than absence." The warning landed heavy. Thomas thought about the times he'd promised Emma things a ride together. A picnic. A visit to town, then canceled when work demanded attention. "I won't disappoint her again," he said. "I see that you don't." Grace stood to leave. "Same time next week." Actually, Thomas hesitated. "I do." "Would you join us for supper tomorrow? Emma asks about you. I think she'd enjoy having you here." "Auntie." Grace considered, then nodded. "I'd like that." After she left, Thomas sat at the table where he'd shared meals with his daughter all week. The room felt different now. Warmer. Less like a formal dining room. More like a place where family gathered. Emma appeared in her nightgown. Papa." "Yes." "Why is Miss Grace teaching you?" He could have deflected, made excuses. Instead, he chose honesty. "Because I forgot how to be your father. I'm trying to remember." Emma climbed into his lap, something she hadn't done in years. She was getting big, all elbows and knees, but she still fit against his chest. "I'm glad you're trying," she whispered. Thomas held his daughter and felt the first crack in the ice around his heart. April brought rain and the first green shoots of spring. The ranch transformed from brown winter dormancy to tentative life. "Ricornifomai," Thomas noticed because Emma pointed it out during their evening walks. "Look, Papa, the cottonwoods are budding." He looked. She was right. Grace joined them for supper 3 times a week now. The arrangement had evolved naturally from teacher-student to something warmer. She brought books for Emma, discussed literature and history. She asked Thomas about ranching, genuinely interested in his work. One evening, spring thunder rolled across the valley. Rain hammered the roof. Thomas was reading contracts in his study when he heard crying from upstairs. He took the stairs two at a time. Emma's room. The door stood open. She sat on her bed, hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face. Each thunderclap made her flinch. Rema. Thomas entered slowly, remembering Grace's coaching. Offer comfort. Don't demand she stop crying. I hate storms. Emma sobbed. He sat beside her. Awkward at first. Then he put his arm around her shoulders. She pressed against him, shaking. My mother used to tell me a story about thunder, Thomas said. Surprising himself, he hadn't thought of this in 30 years. Her mother told her that thunder was the sound of sky horses running across the clouds. Big wild mustangs with manes made of lightning, Emma's crying quieted. Sky horses, racing each other from horizon to horizon. He felt her small hand grip his shirt. She said if you listened carefully, you could hear their hooves. They sat together as the storm raged. Emma stopped crying, started listening. Her breathing slowed, matching his. Papa, she said softly, I want a horse. A real one. He smiled. Yes. I want to learn to ride like the ranch hands. She looked up at him. Could you teach me? His throat tightened. I'd like that very much. Why didn't you before? The question was innocent, but it cut deep. Because you never asked. You were always busy. No accusation in her voice. Simple fact. Thomas held his daughter while rain drummed overhead and thunder rolled distant. Honda. She'd been waiting her whole life for him to be available, and he'd been too blind to see. The next evening, Grace arrived for supper, carrying a game. 3 good things, she announced. Everyone shares 3 good things from their day. Thomas went first, stumbling through it. The south pasture fence is repaired. The rain was good for the grass. And he looked at Emma. Emma taught me that cottonwoods bud in April. Emma beamed. Her turn. I finished my arithmetic lesson. Sarah let me borrow her blue ribbon. And Papa held me during the storm. Grace's eyes softened. My turn. I received a letter from an old friend. My students learned all their spelling words. And she glanced between them. I'm grateful to share supper with good company. The game became ritual. Every evening. 3 good things. Forced at first, then genuine. Thomas found himself looking for moments worth sharing. Small joys he'd overlooked for years while chasing larger goals. Watateni. 2 weeks after the thunderstorm, Emma laughed at his joke about stubborn cattle. Not a polite giggle, but real laughter that lit up her whole face. Thomas stopped mid-sentence. He'd never heard that sound before. Not really heard it. With full attention, the realization struck him breathless. 10 years. His daughter had lived in his house for 10 years, and he was just now learning what her laugh sounded like. Grace caught his expression across the table, understanding passed between them. This was what he'd been missing. This moment. This sound. This child becoming real to him. After Emma went to bed, Grace gathered her things to leave. Thomas walked her to the wagon. I thank you, he said quietly. for giving me back my daughter." Grace looked at him in the lamplight spilling from the house. "You're giving her back to yourself." "Mr. Thornton, I'm just helping you remember how the spring night was soft with rain scent and new grass." Thomas watched Grace drive away, her lamp swaying gently on the wagon seat. He stood alone under the stars and admitted a truth he'd been avoiding. He was falling in love with his teacher, the widow who'd stormed his fortress and demanded he be better, who saw past his wealth and power to the broken man underneath. But first, he had to prove himself worthy, not to her, but to Emma. His daughter deserved a real father before he could think about being anything else. Inside, lamplight glowed from Emma's window. Yellow curtains. Yellow flowers. His daughter's favorite color. He was finally learning to see. The letter arrived the first week of May. Water rights dispute with the Hamilton Ranch. They were claiming access to Porter Creek, which ran through Thomas's northeast property. Litigation threatened. Potential loss of crucial water access for summer grazing. Thomas read the legal notice and felt old instincts surge. This required immediate attention, full focus. He couldn't afford distraction. He worked through supper that night, and the next sent word to Grace that lessons would pause until the crisis resolved. Buried himself in maps and property surveys and territorial law. Emma ate alone in the dining room, waited for him each evening. After 3 nights, she stopped waiting. Grace received his message and penned a sharp reply. "Crisis management is not a reason to abandon your daughter. See you Tuesday as planned." He didn't respond. Too busy. Too stressed. The Hamilton Ranch had hired a lawyer from Denver. This could drag on for months. Cost him thousands. He had to protect what he'd built. For Emma's future. He told himself. Always for Emma's future. Tuesday evening. Grace arrived uninvited. Thomas's housekeeper showed her to the study, where he sat, surrounded by documents. Miss Halloway, I sent word." "I received it." Grace closed the door behind her. "You're making a mistake. This is business. You don't understand." He gestured at the papers. "I could lose access to Porter Creek. That's 1,500 acres of summer grazing, and you're losing your daughter while you fight for grass." Grace's voice stayed level, but steel underneath. "You disappeared for a week. Emma waited for you at supper. She asked me if she'd done something wrong." Thomas winced. "I'll make it up to her when this is settled." "When how many years did you spend building your empire while she grew up without you?" Grace stepped closer. "You're doing it again. Finding an excuse to hide in your work." "This isn't an excuse. This is real." His frustration flared. "The Hamiltons could take me to court. I have to protect what I've built. You're fighting for land. Mr. Thornton, Emma needs a father, not a landlord." The words landed like a slap. He stood abruptly, defensive. "You don't understand the burden of responsibility. I have hundreds of men depending on this ranch. I have contracts, obligations. I understand responsibility better than you think." Grace's composure cracked slightly. "My husband died and left me nothing but debts. I sold everything we owned to pay them. I know about burden. I know about obligation." He hadn't known that. Hadn't asked. "But I also know you can't love someone in your spare time," Grace continued. "You can't be a father only when it's convenient. Emma deserves better than leftovers of your attention." "I'm doing this for her. Are you... Grace picked up one of his property surveys. Or are you doing what's comfortable? Work is safe. Numbers are predictable. Your daughter's heart is neither... She set the map down. You're afraid. Mr. Thornton. Afraid of losing her, the way you lost Sarah. So you keep distance. You can't grieve what you never really had. The truth of it stole his breath. Get out, he said quietly. Grace nodded, expecting this. She gathered her satchel, moved toward the door. Miss Holloway, he called. She paused. Don't come back until I send for you. Very well. Aubrey. Her voice held disappointment, but not surprise. I hope you find what you're looking for in those property lines. The door closed. Thomas stood alone in his study, maps spread before him like armor. He'd won the argument, defended his position, proven his point. He felt hollow, in the hallway outside, unseen. Emma pressed her back against the wall. She'd heard everything. The raised voices, the accusations, the dismissal. Miss Grace wouldn't return. Papa had chosen his work. Again. Emma fled to her room, climbed into bed, pulled yellow curtains closed against the world. She didn't cry. She'd learned early that crying didn't bring people back. She just curled small and waited for the loneliness to feel normal again. Thomas won his legal battle in 2 weeks. The territorial court upheld his water rights. The Hamiltons withdrew their claim, paid his legal fees, issued formal apology. He returned to the ranch house with a signed judgment. Victory in hand. Water access secured for generations. Emma was polite at supper, answered his questions with single word. Fine. Yes. No. The stranger daughter had returned. He tried his 3 questions. She gave 3 answers. Mechanical and distant. No laughter. No stories. No warmth. Grace's words haunted him. You can't love someone in your spare time. On the 3rd night of empty victory, Thomas couldn't sleep. He wandered the house, restless, found himself in the hallway outside Emma's room. Her door stood ajar. He pushed it open quietly. Lamplight from the hall fell across her desk. She'd been drawing earlier, left her sketchbook open. Thomas stepped inside, looked at the drawing. His chest constricted. She'd drawn their family again, the same big house. But now there were 3 figures, all standing far apart. One by the barn, him. One by the front door, Emma. And one walking away toward the road, small satchel in hand. Grace? The distance between them measured in ink and emptiness. He sank into the chair by Emma's desk, picked up the drawing with shaking hands. What had he done? He'd won water rights and lost everything that mattered. Built an empire on fear and called it love. Grace was right. He was hiding, using work as excuse, crisis as justification, responsibility as armor, against the terrifying vulnerability of actually being present. He was afraid. Afraid Emma would grow up and leave. Afraid she'd get sick like Sarah. Afraid of loving completely and losing everything. So he kept distance, told himself it was protection. But Emma was already leaving, pulling away from a father who appeared and disappeared like spring rain, unreliable and briefly warm before vanishing again. Thomas looked at his daughter's sleeping form. She'd given up on him. He could see it in the careful politeness, the single-word answers, the way she no longer asked him questions. He'd had his chance and wasted it on pride. Dawn found him still sitting there, staring at the drawing, The house woke around him. Emma stirred, opened her eyes, saw him in the chair. "Papa," confused, cautious. "I'm sorry," he said, "for leaving again, for choosing work over you, for—" his voice broke. "For all the years I've been absent." Emma sat up slowly. "You're very busy." "I used business as an excuse to avoid being your father. And the confession cost him everything. I was afraid. Afraid of losing you like I lost your mother. Easier to stay distant than risk that pain." She studied him with ancient eyes. 10 years old and already learning not to hope? "I want to do better." Thomas said, "If you'll give me another chance." "You said that before." No accusation. Just fact. "I did. And I failed." He stood, moved to her bedside. "But I'm asking anyway, because you deserve a real father, not a landlord managing your inheritance." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "What about Miss Grace? I need to apologize to her too." Thomas managed a small smile. "Think she'll forgive me?" "Miss Grace is kind." Emma considered, "But she's also strong. You hurt her." "I know." He sat on the edge of her bed. Will you come with me to ask her together?" Emma searched his face, looking for sincerity or another broken promise. Whatever she saw must have satisfied, because she nodded slowly. "Okay. Papa, one more chance." They rode to the schoolhouse together. Thomas on his gelding, Emma on the gentle mare he'd bought her last week, a yellow palomino named Sunshine. The morning was bright with May sunshine, the kind that made promises. Grace was sweeping the schoolhouse steps when they arrived. She looked up, saw them, and her expression went carefully neutral. Thomas dismounted, helped Emma down. They walked forward together. "Miss Halloway," he said, hat in hands. "I owe you an apology." Grace waited, saying nothing. "You were right. About everything." The words came hard, but necessary. "I was hiding. Using work as excuse. Afraid of losing Emma, the way I lost Sarah. So, I kept distance." He met her eyes. "Easier to stay distant than risk that pain. Why get in now?" Grace's voice was cool, but not cruel. "Now I understand that love is the risk." Thomas glanced at Emma, who nodded encouragement. "You can't have one without the other. Fear or love. Distance or presence. I chose wrong." Grace descended the steps slowly. "What happens when the next crisis comes? The next legal battle or business emergency?" "I don't know." Thomas admitted. "I'll probably want to retreat, but—" He looked at his daughter. "Emma deserves better than my fear. She deserves someone who stays." Grace turned to Emma. "What do you want, sweetheart?" "I want Papa to try again." Emma said quietly, "And I want you to come back." "Please." The teacher's reserve cracked. She knelt, pulled Emma into a hug, over the child's shoulder. She met Thomas's gaze. "One condition," Grace said. "No more running when it gets hard. Fatherhood isn't seasonal work. Mr. Thornton, you don't get to plant in spring and disappear until harvest." "I understand." He meant it. "I'll do." "Will you help us, both of us?" Grace stood, brushed dust from her skirt. "Tuesday evenings, don't miss one." I won't. They rode back together. 3 people on 2 horses. Emma sat in front of Thomas, chattering about her new drawing project. Grace drove her wagon beside them, occasionally adding comments. The May morning was warm with possibility. Thomas felt something shift in his chest, the weight of fear lifting slightly, replaced by tentative hope. He would fail again, make mistakes, disappoint. But he would keep trying, keep showing up, keep choosing love over comfort. Yegor. For the first time in 10 years, the future felt less like burden and more like promise. June arrived in full glory. The ranch bloomed green and gold, wildflowers carpeting the meadows. Thomas kept his word. Present every supper. Tuesday lessons without fail. Morning rides with Emma on sunshine. The transformation happened in small increments. Emma taught him the names of flowers. He taught her to mend fences. Grace brought books. They read aloud on the porch, 3 voices blending in evening air. The game of 3 good things continued. Thomas found himself looking for moments worth sharing. Emma's laugh when sunshine nuzzled her pockets for treats. Grace's smile over morning coffee. The way sunset painted the mountains purple and gold. He was learning his daughter. Her favorite flower was Indian paintbrush. She hummed while drawing. She wanted to be a teacher someday. Like Grace. She was brave about most things, but still frightened of thunderstorms. Emma was learning her father, too. His favorite time of day was dawn. He could whistle birdsong. He'd wanted to be a doctor once. Before the war changed his plans, he still missed her mother every single day, and Grace had become part of their rhythm. Not just teacher, not just friend. Something deeper that neither adult named, but both felt. The town noticed. Of course. The widow schoolteacher dining at the Baron's ranch 3 times a week. Tongues wagged. Grace ignored them with practiced grace. One evening in late June, after Emma went to bed, Thomas walked Grace to her wagon. The sky was still light. Summer stretching daylight into evening. "Thank you," he said. "I for not giving up on us. I'm stubborn." Grace smiled. "Comes with the teaching profession. It's more than that." Thomas leaned against the wagon. "You saw something worth saving when I couldn't see it myself." Grace studied him in the golden light. He looked different than 3 months ago, less guarded, softer around the edges. The wall he'd built had crumbled, leaving the man underneath visible. "You did the work, Mr. Thornton. I just pointed the direction." "Thomas," he said. "Please call me Thomas." "Thomas." She tested the name, liked how it felt. "I'm Grace. ID." They stood in comfortable silence, watching fireflies begin their evening dance. The ranch house glowed warm behind them. Emma's yellow curtains caught the last light. "Grace," Thomas said carefully. "May I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever think about—" He stopped, unsure, about the future, about what comes after teaching. She understood what he was really asking. "Sometimes, and what do you see?" Grace turned to face him fully. "I see a good man who learned to be present, a beautiful girl who finally knows her father, and a teacher who—" She paused, who found herself hoping for things she thought she'd buried with her husband. Thomas's breath caught. "Gussie." "Not yet," she said gently. "Emma needs you fully present first. Needs to trust this is permanent, not temporary. Give her that before you think about anything else." He nodded, accepting the wisdom. "You're right. I usually am." Grace smiled to soften the words. Now help me into this wagon before propriety becomes a real concern. He laughed, offered his hand. She took it, climbed aboard. Same time Tuesday, he asked. Wouldn't miss it. 2 weeks later, on a perfect July evening, the three of them sat on the porch watching sunset. Emma between them. Thomas's arm around her shoulders, her head near Grace's lap. The sky blazed orange and pink and gold. Mountains stood purple against the light. Fireflies danced in the garden. Peace settled over them like a benediction. Emma spoke softly. Miss Grace, could you stay forever? Not just for teaching. Just stay. The words hung in the warm air. Thomas met Grace's eyes over Emma's head. Everything unspoken between them surfaced. The widow teacher who'd lost everything. The widowed baron who'd almost lost what mattered. The child who'd brought them together. Would your father like that? Grace asked. Voice gentle. Thomas found his courage. Found his truth. More than anything. Emma's face blazed with joy. Really, you mean it? I do, Thomas said. Then to Grace, if you'll have us, both of us, a ranch full of responsibility, and a father who's still learning, and a daughter who, yes, one, Grace interrupted, laughing. Yes, Thomas, I'll stay. Emma threw her arms around Grace's neck. Thomas wrapped them both in his embrace. 3 people forming a circle. Broken pieces fitting together whole. The sunset painted the world gold. Summer evening stretched long and sweet. In the distance, cattle lowed. Closer. Sunshine whinnied from her paddock. Emma pulled back. Looked between them with ancient wisdom. So we'll be a real family. We already are, Grace said. Thomas kissed his daughter's forehead. Met Grace's eyes over her head. Yes, sweetheart. We already are. Night fell gently around them. Stars emerged one by one, and in the yellow-curtained window of a ranch house in 3 valleys, lamplight glowed steady and warm. Home. The courtship that followed was proper, but inevitable. Grace continued teaching at the schoolhouse while dining at the ranch most evenings. The town gossip shifted from scandal to approval. A widow teacher and land baron made sense together. Thomas courted her the old-fashioned way. Flowers picked from the meadow, books ordered from Denver. Long conversations on the porch while Emma drew nearby. He learned Grace's favorite color was green. Like spring grass, that she'd always wanted to travel, but never had the means. That she missed her mother's apple pie recipe. She learned he'd built the empire partly from grief, partly from duty inherited from his own father. That he'd never stopped loving Sarah but had room in his heart for new love. Mendansteinen, that he was trying, every day, to be worthy of the second chance he'd been given. In August, he proposed. Emma was present, beaming in her yellow dress. They sat together in the garden at sunset. The 3 of them. Thomas pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, a simple gold band with small emerald, his mother's ring. Grace Halloway, he said, voice steady despite nerves. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? And he glanced at Emma. Would you be mother to this remarkable daughter? Emma held her breath. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Not to replace her mother. Thomas added quickly. But to honor what Sarah would want for Emma, for all of us. Grace took the ring, held it up to catch the light. Green stone glowing, Then she looked at Emma. What do you think? Sweetheart, should I say yes? Emma nodded vigorously. Please say yes. Then yes. Grace slipped the ring on her finger. Yes to both of you. They married in September. Small ceremony in the church, with the whole town attending. Emma stood beside Grace, holding her bouquet of yellow wildflowers. The preacher spoke about second chances and love that grows gentle in time. Thomas's vows were simple. I promise to stay, to be present, to choose you both, every day. Then Grace's answer. I promise to teach you both, love you both, build home with you both. Emma's flower petals made a golden path. The church bells rang clear, and the widow teacher became the land baron's wife, the lonely child's mother, the missing piece of a family, finally made whole. Autumn settled over the ranch with gentle gold. Leaves turned. Geese flew south, cattle moved to winter pastures. The rhythm of seasons continued, but now within the rhythm of family. 1 year after Emma's question in the schoolhouse, Grace asked her student, Emma, what's a father supposed to do? They sat at the kitchen table, bread dough rising near the stove. Thomas working at his desk in the next room, door open so he could hear them talk. Emma considered. Older now, but still thoughtful. Love you. Teach you things. Hold you when storms come. She paused, adding more. Watch sunsets together. Remember your favorite color. Be there when you need him. What else? Grace prompted. Stay. Emma's voice was certain. Fathers are supposed to stay. Thomas appeared in the doorway. And what about mothers? Emma grinned. Mothers teach you to make bread, and how to be strong. And she hugged Grace. They love you even when you're difficult. Especially then. Grace agreed. Thomas joined them at the table, covered in flour dust now as Emma kneaded dough. What else do families do? 3 good things, Emma announced. I'll start. I learned a new song. Sunshine let me braid her mane. And she looked at both adults. I have the best family in 3 valleys. Grace went next. I received a letter from a former student. My bread is rising perfectly, and I'm grateful for this moment right here. Thomas took his turn. The harvest is good. Emma's drawing won the school contest. And he reached across the table, took Grace's hand. Every morning I wake up and remember I chose right. The evening stretched ahead of them. Bread to bake, supper to share, stories to tell on the porch, beyond the window. Autumn light painted the ranch gold. Mountains stood purple against the sky. Emma had drawn a new family portrait last week. 3 figures close together. Yellow horse in the background. House warm with lamplight. No distance between them now. No emptiness. Just connection. Love. Presence. She knew her father's favorite color, now blue. Like morning sky. He knew her dreams to teach someday. To help others learn. To have a family like the one they'd built together. They knew each other. Really knew. In the way family does. Grace asked one more question. Emma, what's a family supposed to do? The girl thought. Then smiled. Love each other. Teach each other. Choose each other. Every single day. Exactly right. Thomas said, perfect answer. Grace agreed. Night fell gently. Lamps were lit. Bread came out of the oven, golden and perfect. They ate supper together, shared 3 good things, laughed at Emma's jokes. Later, when Emma was asleep in her yellow room, Thomas and Grace sat on the porch. Stars spread overhead. The ranch stretched to darkness. "Do you ever regret it?" Thomas asked. At taking on a broken man and his neglected daughter, Grace leaned against him. "Never." "You both taught me something." "What's that?" "That family isn't what you're born into. It's what you choose to build, piece by piece, day by day." She squeezed his hand. "We chose well. We did." Inside, lamplight glowed from the window, a beacon against the dark. 3 people learning family together. Every day, every moment. The land baron who learned to stay. The teacher who taught them all. The daughter who asked the question that changed everything. What's a father supposed to do, love? Teach. Hold. Watch. Remember. Choose. Stay. Always. Always stay. The lamp burned steady in the window. Home was here. Family was here. And tomorrow would bring another day of 3 good things, shared laughter, and the quiet miracle of presence. 3 valleys stretched under stars. An empire built on land. But the real inheritance was this: a child who knew she was loved. A father who learned to be present. A mother who taught them both what mattered. And in a yellow-curtained room, a drawing pinned to the wall. 3 figures close together. House glowing warm. Mountains painted purple and gold. Finally, completely, blessedly home.